there should be no law against killing people. I know it's a wrong thing, but hell, you restrict somebody from it, they're gonna want it more.
We found our victim, and sad as it may be, she's our friend. But you know what? We all have to make sacrifices. Our first victim is going to be Cassie Stoddart. She's going to be alone in a big, dark house out in the middle of nowhere. How perfect can you get? I mean, like, holy shit, dude.
I'm horny just thinking about it.
Hell yeah.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
I am Lauren.
I am Ken.
And this is Paradise After Dark.
Dark.
Paradise After Dark is an independent podcast covering true crime,
unsolved mysteries,
missing people,
and every now and then an urban legend.
If you'd like to support our show and get a bunch of extra content, please sign up for our Patreon at patreon.com/Palmahawk Media. That's PALMAHAWK Media.
And please be sure to check out our website at paradiseafterdark.com.
On the website, you'll find links to all of our episodes, even the archived episodes, our mailing list, merch store, links to all of our social medias, and of course, our Patreon.
And also, we have a new hangout there. At least it seems that way. We have a tip jar there. So if you want to help out the show, you can go visit our virtual tip jar and leave us a tip, and we'll give you a shout out on the show. Just like our new friend that we have of the show who just started listening is Evan from Evans, Georgia. Imagine that. Who saw that coming?
I've got one. We've got James from West Palm Beach.
James from West Palm Beach. Thank you, James. And Brian from Houston, Texas.
Houston, Texas.
Go Oilers.
Everything's bigger in Texas. Next, we have Kathy from St. Augustine, Florida.
And from a little closer to home, Valerie from Lakeland.
And even closer than that, we have Amy, a repeat offender from Miami.
A repeat offender. Amy, is it our friend Amy?
It's our friend Amy. She's a patron as well.
Amy is a super friend.
She's a super friend of our show.
Super friend of the show.
All right. So
be sure to check us out. Go to our website. A lot of cool stuff. We got some new shirts in there and more merchandise to come as we head off to CrimeCon.
That's right. And I don't know if this is probably going to be too late, but if you still want a last-minute ticket to CrimeCon, use code PARADISE for 10% off.
They also have the virtual, which you can use our code too, I believe.
Right, they are. They just announced they're doing a virtual CrimeCon. You can watch the whole thing from home, and you can also use our promo code PARADISE for that as well.
Exactly. So also, they're doing a Saturday-only show, which is going to be very interesting. So I'm excited to see what that does to the audience crowd, because in Austin they said it was kind of a smaller crowd, so I'm curious, being Vegas, a little closer to the West Coast. I'm picturing this is going to be a huge event, and I'm excited to be there.
Well, I've heard through the grapevine that they've already sold over 6,000 tickets, so
that's a lot of tickets. I don't know if we have enough stickers. I'm only teasing. So, Lauren, tonight this case is a very, very sad one.
So tonight we are going to be talking about the case of Cassie Jo Stoddart. But I want to start out talking about the original Scream movie, which was released in the United States on December 20th of 1996. The slasher film was directed by Wes Craven and written by Kevin Williamson. It starred David Arquette, Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox, Matthew Lillard, Rose McGowan, Skeet Ulrich, Jamie Kennedy, and Drew Barrymore. That's a mouthful of popular celebrities.
Indeed.
The basic plot of the movie follows the fictional Sidney Prescott, played by Neve Campbell, a high school student in the fictional town of Woodsboro, California, who becomes the target of a mysterious killer in a Halloween costume known as Ghostface. The movie was actually based on real events, a case that we covered not so long ago, the Gainesville Ripper. Remember Danny Rolling?
I remember that sick bastard.
So this movie was based on a real case. Scream was credited with revitalizing the slasher genre in the 1990s, which was considered to be almost dead following an influx of direct-to-video titles and numerous sequels to established horror franchises of the 70s and 80s.
That was a great time for a lot of horror movies. I mean, you had Halloween, you had Friday the 13th, you had...
You're talking about the 70s and 80s.
Yes, Nightmare on Elm Street.
Because in the 90s, it was dying.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is back in the 70s and 80s, you had those huge, like, blockbuster hits in the horror movies. So if you were into that, those were great slasher movies at the time.
Right.
It's funny looking back on it now, they weren't all that great, but you had those. But then they started coming out with all these sequels afterwards, and it just kind of killed the whole genre of the slashers like she was referring to. I mean, you were up to like 12 Friday the 13th, and then Jason Meets Freddy. So Scream was one of the best slasher movies that came out, if you were into that, since that whole thing. So I agree there on that.
Well, Scream's success spawned a series of sequels, but the sequels were not nearly as successful as the first.
No, that's where they followed the whole genre kill. I mean, literally, they killed the show.
In the years following the release of Scream and its sequels, the movies were actually accused of inspiring and even inducing violent crimes and murders. Copycats, if you will. And one of those copycat murders is what we will be discussing tonight. But first, let's get to know our victim, because she's the most important person in this story. Cassie Jo Stoddart was born December 21st, 1989 in Pocatello, Idaho. Pocatello is in Bannock County in southeastern Idaho. This is where Cassie spent her whole life. Now, side note, Pocatello may sound familiar to you because it is also where the true crime documentary Abducted in Plain Sight took place.
What a sick documentary.
That documentary still boggles my mind.
It's sick in a lot of ways, and it wasn't even murderous.
So at the time of Cassie's murder, she was a junior at Pocatello High School. She and her siblings, Christy and Andrew, were raised by their grandparents for a while when they were younger, although in our research we couldn't find a reason for this. Cassie was described as being artistic and had a love for music. Cassie Jo wasn't known to drink or do any drugs and got straight A's in school. She was an all-around good kid. Pocatello was known to be a quiet, mostly Mormon town where not much was really happening, except abductions in plain sight and whatnot.
So now we have to talk about the murderers in this particular case. So let's rewind here for a few minutes. First, I want to talk about Brian Lee Draper. He was born March 21st, 1990 in Utah. Now, he and his family moved into Pocatello, Idaho when Draper was a teenager. And Draper had this long history of writing about suicides and killing other people. So he's a bit of an odd character, obviously. Now, Brian wrote on his MySpace page that he was, quote, sick in the head and no one knows it. Well, he obviously knew it at that time. Now, when Brian was in 8th grade, he and 2 other boys were actually caught planning a school shooting. But, of course, they were all talked to, and once it was all said and done, all 3 boys denied that they were even serious, so obviously nothing occurred.
Red flags, red flags. I'm over here waving a red flag.
Exactly. So then let's go ahead and bring in Torey Michael Adamcik. Now, this guy was born June 14th, 1990 in Pocatello, so he's a local, and he's lived there his whole life. And, of course, sharing a common interest, Adamcik and Draper become friends pretty quickly. And they both enjoyed horror films, and they actually started recording their own. I mean, Draper was often seen walking around school with this Sony camcorder filming. Now, you remember those little palm quarters that they had?
Yes.
I had one. Matter of fact, I actually have 2. They cut those little cassettes, and when those were popular, late 90s, early 2000s, people had them everywhere.
Yeah.
So these guys were filming their own little horror movies, and they just thought it was a great thing. And so they both apparently had an obsession with murder and serial killers. And it's not that they just like true crime, but I mean, hold on a second. If you were to check my browsing history, you would assume that I like serial killers and everything else too. But it's not like I'm idolizing guys like they did. See, it wasn't that they just were into true crime. They were idolizing these serial killers. I mean, Ted Bundy, Zodiac Killer, even had some infatuation with the Columbine murderers.
Yeah, Draper in particular had always admired Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris, the Columbine killers, mainly because of the attention they received after their massacre.
Exactly. And you notice we said the Columbine killers. I don't like it when they say shooters. These guys were murderers.
Oh, yeah, they were killers.
Exclamation. Well, Adamcik was said to be obsessed with the movie Scream, as Lauren talked about in the beginning, and wanted to replicate these murders in real life. So they began to document themselves on video, talking about murder just in general. So they wanted they thought it was like exciting to act like the two main killers in the movie Scream.
It was rumored that Draper had a big crush on Cassie Jo and was very jealous of her relationship with her boyfriend, Matt Beckham. Around August 31st, 2006, Torey Adamcik called 18-year-old Joe Lucero and asked if he would buy some knives for him. On the way, they stopped at an ATM so that Draper could withdraw money, and of the $45 paid for the knives, Draper provided 40 of that. Adamcik pointed out one knife, and Draper selected 3 others.
Well, Draper and Adamcik also begun videotaping snippets of themselves talking about killing, as we mentioned earlier. So they made an actual kill list that contained names of many of their friends and classmates, including that of Cassie Jo Stoddart. Now, at some point, they decided that Cassie Jo was going to be the first victim. Now, on September 21st, 2006, the boys videotaped themselves talking about and planning the murder of Cassie. Now, this is what you heard, the clip in our intro. This is what you heard. But let's go ahead and replay that clip for them now.
There should be no law against killing people. I know it's a wrong thing, but hell, you restrict somebody from it, they're gonna want it more.
We found our victim, and sad as it may be, she's our friend. But you know what? We all have to make sacrifices. Our first victim is going to be Cassie Stoddart. She's going to be alone in a big, dark house out in the middle of nowhere. How perfect can you get? I mean, like, holy shit, dude.
I'm horny just thinking about it.
Hell yeah. It's 9:50, September 22nd, 2006. We know there's lots of doors. There's lots of places to hide. I unlocked the back doors. That's all unlocked. Now we just gotta wait.
Okay,
so keep in mind that there were other attempts that these two individuals had made they claimed that they had made to kill other people, but certain people weren't home. So this was prior to doing their full kill list. They made the kill list, but then decided the most available person at this time that they could be successful with was Cassie.
right. So, on September 22nd, 2006, 16-year-old Cassie Jo Stoddart was house-sitting for her aunt and uncle, Allison and Frank Contreras, at their home in a rural area just a few miles away from her own residence in Pocatello. Now, that night, Cassie invited her boyfriend, Matt Beckham, to join her at the house. Beckham, in turn, invited his friend, Torey Adamcik, who brought along another friend, Brian Draper. Unknown to Matt and Cassie, Adamcik and Draper were planning on killing Cassie that night, as we unfortunately already know. Adamcik and Draper arrived at the house between 6:30 and 7 p.m. Cassie gave the boys a tour of her aunt and uncle's house, and while she was showing them the basement, Draper unlocked the door which led to the backyard without Cassie's knowledge.
So he snuck over there and unlocked it while no one was paying attention.
Right.
So basically planning.
Once Cassie finished giving the tour, the four returned to the living room and began watching the movie Kill Bill Volume 2. About halfway through the movie, Adamcik and Draper told Matt and Cassie they wanted to leave. They were going to go to the movie theater to see a different movie. So not long after they left, the power in the house went out, scaring Cassie and Matt. At the same time, one of the dogs began growling at the door which led to the basement stairs, which scared the couple even more. Matt phoned his mother and asked if he could stay the night there with Cassie because she was so freaked out by the power going off, but his mother said no.
And before everyone gets upset with the mother, because I've seen a lot, especially on Reddit, where people kind of went after the mother about this, there was a big surprise. She had a surprise. I guess her father was coming home from something. There was some stories that he was out of town, military rehab. I'm not sure 100% exactly what it was because I can't find it. But it wasn't that the mother just said, no, you can't stay there. Sorry. It was she was set up a surprise for him that night, so he needed to come home.
So instead, Matt's mother suggested that Cassie come stay at their house and she would bring her back in the morning. But Cassie declined. She felt responsible to the home and the pets that she was watching over and didn't feel like it was right for her to leave.
That shows some responsibility on her part.
Eventually, some of the lights came back on, and this made Matt and Cassie feel a little bit better. Now, Matt's mother came to pick him up around 11 p.m., leaving Cassie alone in the large, isolated house. Matt called Adamcik's cell phone to see where he and Draper were, possibly to meet up with them later. Matt Beckham said that he could barely hear Adamcik, who was whispering on the phone, and he assumed that the boys were in a movie theater, but they were actually in the basement in the home he had just left with his unsuspecting girlfriend. So Matt just went home and spent the rest of his night home with his parents.
So earlier at some point after leaving the house, Draper and Adamcik return to the neighborhood. They park down the street. They get out of the car and they put on these costumes that consisted of dark clothing, gloves, and white masks. Keep in mind, they're imitating the Scream movie. So this sort of goes along with the plot. So the boys quietly entered the house through the basement door while Matt and Cassie were watching television in the living room. So they intentionally made loud noises in an unsuccessful attempt to lure Matt and Cassie downstairs so they could, quote, scare them. So they're just trying to scare them at this point. So they're trying to make all this noise, trying to get Matt and Cassie to come downstairs, but obviously not successful. So next, they go in and they find the circuit breaker and they turned off partial power in the house, figuring this is going to scare them. They're going to have to come and flip on breakers. When that didn't work, they killed the entire power to the house. They killed the main breaker. Now, at this point, they're definitely hoping that the pair would come downstairs to check the breaker. And when they didn't come downstairs, the boys turned the lights back on, but partially, some of them, not all of them. So from the basement, Draper and Adamcik heard Beckham leave. So they can hear, the phone calls, all this. This is not something that just happens in a couple minutes. This is a pretty drawn out time where he calls his mom. His mom comes and gets him. They hear him leave. So the boys turn the lights out again. And again, at the circuit breaker, they killed it completely and they waited. Now they're hoping Cassie at this point would come downstairs and turn the lights back on. But of course, she didn't.
Eventually, the boys went upstairs. Draper was armed with a dagger-type weapon, and Adamcik had a hunting knife. Remember those knives that they had their friend Joe Lucero buy for them at the pawn shop?
Mm-hmm.
Those were the knives used eventually to brutally murder Cassie. Draper then attempted to scare Cassie by opening and slamming a closet door at the top of the stairs.
Picture this. You're in this old farmhouse. You're alone. The lights go out. You're alone. Boyfriend left. And next thing you know, doors are slamming.
Power goes out.
Exactly. Doors are slamming, and you've just got to be frightened.
I mean, it really is kind of just like the Scream movie.
Exactly.
When this attempt failed to frighten Cassie, Draper and Adamcik attacked. The two stabbed Cassie Jo repeatedly until she stopped moving. Forensic pathologist Dr. Charles Garrison later testified that most of the fatal wounds struck the right ventricle of Cassie's heart. They left Cassie on the floor and took off in their car, but obviously they had to film themselves in the aftermath.
Of course, they're movie stars right at this point.
And we actually have the audio of the
drive home
and the things that they were saying. And we'll play that for you now, then we're going to take a quick break.
I just killed Cassie. We just left her house. This is not a fucking joke.
I'm shaking.
I stabbed her in the throat and I saw her lifeless body just disappear. Dude, I just killed Cassie. Oh, fuck. That felt like fucking real. I mean, it went by so fast.
Shut the fuck up. We gotta get our act straight.
Okay.
And we're back. Now, after the murder of Cassie, Draper and Adamcik drive to Black Rock Canyon, and there they buried the knives, the clothing, gloves, the videotape. They go and basically hide it all, right? They're going to try to be secretive now. They've committed this huge crime. They're trying to get famous. Then they drive back to Adamcik's house, and they sat and watched a movie. Now, here's a very disturbing part of this story, is Adamcik is so sick that he hooks up with Matt. Now remember, Matt is Cassie's boyfriend, who he was planning on killing the night before had he come downstairs.
Right.
So it wasn't just going to be Cassie. He was planning on killing Matt too. But Matt and Adamcik spent the following day together, hanging out. And I think they watched movies and just doing whatever it is teenage, kids do. Matt tried repeatedly to call Cassie throughout the next day, but was unable to get any answer from her, obviously. Now, 2 days later, on September 24th, the Contreras family arrived home as planned. You know, they're not early, they're not late. So her Uncle Frank and her Aunt Allison's 13-year-old daughter was the first one to enter the home. Now, the front door was unlocked, which she found a little strange, but she didn't think too much of it, figuring, well, Cassie's there and, you know, it's a farmhouse. What could go wrong, right? So when she goes into the living room, she begins screaming. So she's terrified at the sight she sees. There was blood everywhere. It's on the carpet, the furniture, it's on the walls, and on the floor next to the couch was the deceased body of Cassie Jo Stoddart. So Uncle Frank's going to call the police right away and get them moving. Then he immediately contacts Cassie's parents, her mother and her stepfather, who immediately take off and come to the home. They later contacted Cassie's brother and explained to him that his sister had been murdered, that something tragic had happened, to where he's making motions now. He's getting to the crime.
Investigators quickly arrived and began processing the scene. The sheriff's department put the Contreras family up in a hotel during this time. They could not find any signs of forced entry, suggesting that Cassie let her killer or killers into the house, and she likely knew them.
And they were right.
Apart from the scene in the living room, the rest of the house appeared undisturbed. None of the Contreras' belongings were missing, which ruled out burglary as a motive. The dogs and cats had been locked in separate rooms, but were unharmed. Cassie's autopsy report revealed the sheer brutality of her attack. She had been stabbed 30 times in her chest, neck, back, and abdomen. Between 9 and 12 of her stab wounds were fatal. She had defensive wounds on her hands and arms. It was estimated that she had been dead for about 2 days when she was discovered, meaning she was murdered on Friday night. Obviously, suspicion fell on Cassie's boyfriend Matt right away, because, you know, it's always the husband or the boyfriend. Aside from the fact that they always start with the boyfriend or the husband when a female is murdered, as far as anyone else knows, he was the last one to see her Friday night.
Makes perfect sense.
Furthermore, the attack was vicious and brutal. I mean, we're talking like overkill here. This was something usually seen in a frenzied attack perpetrated by someone who knows the victim, perhaps a romantic partner who flew into a rage.
Too common.
However, the authorities' suspicion on Matt quickly dissipated as he was eager to help the investigation. During questioning, he gave a detailed timeline of how he spent that evening. He detailed how Lee Draper and Torey Adamcik had been at the house but left early. He told them about the phone call he made to his mom and wanting to stay with Cassie at the house because he didn't want to leave her alone. But his mom picked him up, and he had spent the rest of the evening with his parents before going to bed. He had phone records to show his calls and texts. The following day, Saturday the 23rd, he repeatedly called Cassie, but she never answered the phone. The combination of his timeline, phone records, alibi from his parents, and his cooperation with their investigation made them confident that he was not involved.
And that's the smartest thing to do, is if you're a close relative, family member, husband, boyfriend, whatever it may be, if you are interrogated ever for a crime that you did not commit, let them go ahead and get you out of the way so they can move to the next suspect.
Exactly.
Which brings us to September 25th of 2006, where Draper and Adamcik were brought in for questioning. Now, they were led into separate rooms with their parents. So they're young children, teenagers.
Yeah, they're under 18, so their parents have to be there.
Exactly. So both of them sat for several interviews with investigators over the next few days. Now, as the questioning from investigators progressed, the two boys became increasingly disorganized and were unable to keep their story straight. Draper said that he and Adamcik had gone to see a movie, and while it was too late to see the movie they had originally intended to see, they went to a different movie called Pulse. But when investigators asked about the movie, Draper was unable to explain anything to do with the plot. So if you're going to use a movie or something as your alibi, you should at least probably know something about this. Well, Adamcik claimed that after they left the house where Cassie was house sitting, Draper said they were going to go back in and scare Cassie and Matt. And Matt's mother came and picked Matt up Now, this is shortly after Draper came upstairs and stabbed Cassie multiple times.
So Adamcik is now blaming Draper,
Exactly.
saying that he thought they were just going to go scare them, but Draper went upstairs and stabbed Cassie.
Exactly.
Okay.
So the next evening, which is September 26th, the officers conducted Draper's second interview. Now, Draper's parents were present, but didn't go into the interview room with him. Now, Draper was read his Miranda rights at this time, before the interview even began, and Draper initially maintained that he and Adamcik had gone to the movies, as he was stating before, but after one of the officers told him that he did not believe that he had gone to the movies, Draper said that he and Adamcik had, quote, gone through some cars, and had said they went to a movie to hide that. So they were just saying they went to a movie, but when they actually were going through cars, so it was making it look like it was like breaking into the cars.
When he was told that his car burglary story was not convincing, Draper insisted that it was the truth. After the interview, Draper left with his parents. After the second interview, a detective went to the Draper residence and, with the consent of Draper and his parents, searched Draper's bedroom for gloves and other items related to Cassie's murder. The detectives found a knife sheath, which Draper said belonged to a friend and that he did not know where the knife was, but that he thought his friend had it.
So Draper's third interview occurred on Wednesday, September 27th, and Draper was again advised of his Miranda rights and again consented to speak. Draper's parents were, this time, present for the interview. It just blew me away when you're reading this and you see that they read him his Miranda rights. He says all these things, and then they let him leave with the parents. My mind was blown.
And this was after Adamcik had already confessed that they were at the house and was blaming Draper for Cassie's murder.
Exactly. So at this particular interview, Draper admitted that he and Adamcik unlocked a door at the Whispering Cliffs home so that they could return to scare Stoddart and Beckham. Now, he also stated that they wore masks, black clothing, gloves, and carried knives with them. And Draper at this point stated that after Beckham left, they went upstairs and Adamcik stabbed Cassie. Adamcik. Remember, now he's blaming Adamcik.
So they're pointing the finger at each other.
Which is usually what happens when there's two people involved. Which is detectives always play that game. Draper said that he thought it was a joke to scare her and only later realized that Cassie was actually being stabbed. And Draper denied that he ever touched or stabbed Cassie. Now, Draper also stated that he had talked to Adamcik earlier that day and that Adamcik had threatened to kill him if he told authorities the truth. So now we got this threat that I gotta hide this secret. I can't say anything, otherwise I'm going to be one getting stabbed. So Draper goes on and leads law enforcement to the stash of evidence that he buried, remember, back at Black Rock Canyon. Remember that he buried all that stuff there.
Right.
So the evidence included 2 dagger-style knives with sheaths, a silver and black-handled knife with a smooth blade, a folding knife, a red and white mask, latex gloves, and this damning videotape that contained footage of both killers explicitly planning Cassie's murder. And several of the items were partially burned, one being a handwritten note. Given the burn marks, they couldn't make out exactly what it said, but it appeared to be some detail of some plan they had for this murder. Now, they were able to decipher something about the possibility of killing Matt if he was in fact at the house. And on top of Brian's confession, it was what the boys talked about in the films that really cemented investigators' beliefs in their guilt.
So Draper and Adamcik were arrested on September 27th of 2006 and charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. And we'll be back right after this break. Okay, and we are back. Now let's talk about the trials of Brian Draper and Torey Adamcik. They were tried separately for the murder of Cassie Jo Stoddart. Brian's trial began in early April 2007, and Torey's began on May 31st, 2007. It was decided that due to the gruesome and horrific nature of the murder, they would be tried as adults.
How do you feel about that? Do you feel like they acted as adults in committing this crime? Because I know a lot of people are very, very weird in the aspect of basically trying minors as adults.
Well, they were 16. It's not like they were 12. And the crime was very gruesome and premeditated. So I have no problem with that in this case in particular.
I'm going to agree with you, but there's going to be times on certain ones we're going to disagree. But I just feel like on this particular case, this is definitely the direct way to go. And trying them separately, you have to, because one is blaming the other.
Right.
So this makes total sense at this point.
So at Draper's trial, the prosecution revealed that Draper had said he was inspired by Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, again, the ones who committed the Columbine High School massacre. Later, Adamcik was said to be inspired by the Scream horror film franchise. 18-year-old Joe Lacero testified at both trials that around August 31st, 2006, he received a call from Torey Adamcik asking if he could buy some knives for him. Together, Torey, Joe, and Brian went to the local pawn shop to buy the knives. On the way, they stopped at the ATM so Brian could withdraw money. Brian provided $40 for the knives and Torey provided $5. Torey chose one knife and Brian chose 3. The medical examiner who performed Cassie's autopsy testified that it did appear Cassie had been stabbed with different knives. For example, a serrated knife and a dagger-style knife could both have been used. Draper did not leave his defense team with much to work with, given his confession, his leading investigators to the evidence in Black Rock Canyon, and the things that he and Torey said on the tapes. He literally said, "Dude, I just killed Cassie." Adamcik, on the other hand, stuck to the defense at trial that he did not know that Brian was actually planning to murder Cassie.
So at this point, he is playing it off.
He thought the whole thing was part of their movie, including the films they made beforehand, the buying of the knives, and the film they made afterwards. Both boys' defense attorneys attempted to have the videos made inadmissible in court and moved for a change of venue as the videos became public.
So why do you feel like they wanted to have the videos removed? I mean, how dumb could you be to say the most damning evidence in a murder case, and we don't want that being shown in court? I mean, seriously.
I mean, I feel like that would have been just like a last-ditch effort to try and help their clients. You know, I don't think that there's any way that those videos would have ever been removed, and they weren't.
What do you think? They feel like that's one of the things they have to at least ask and then give some sort of grounds and hope like hell the judge says, yeah, we're not going to allow that.
Yeah, that's basically grasping at straws.
Exactly. So like there's something that wasn't done properly. They mishandled it or something to that effect, hoping there's some, all the I's weren't dotted, T's were crossed.
Well, I don't know if it was a leak or what, but the videos did become public and everyone could watch Draper and Adamcik on film talking about their plans to murder Cassie and then bragging about it afterwards.
Well, that makes good grounds to move it to a different venue, of course.
A change of venue, yes. That would probably be something that may have been granted, but the prosecution in both trials claimed that the boys' motive for murdering Cassie was fame and notoriety. They used their own words against them from the tape in which they said they were going to be infamous like Ted Bundy and the Hillside Strangler.
Nobody wants to be infamous like those douchebags.
Well, sickos do. On April 17th of 2007, Brian Draper was found guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder in the first degree. On June 8th, 2007, Torey Adamcik was also found guilty on both charges. On August 21st of 2007, both were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus 30 years for conspiracy to commit murder. Adamcik and Draper are still serving their sentences at the Idaho State Correctional Institution.
Okay, so let's get into the aftermath of the crime, because you know how I feel. And whenever a case like this occurs, there's always a lot more victims than just Cassie in this case. I mean, obviously Cassie was the main victim, obviously. This is terrifying. If you could see, I've seen some of the pictures, I've read a lot of the things, the autopsy reports. She had a lot of defensive wounds. which meant she was cut up pretty bad. She was fighting everything
she fought
had.
back.
She was giving everything she had to try to stay alive in this case. But the fear in her eyes looking at her friends. I mean, these people were, I'm not going to say they're friends because technically speaking, she did not really want them there, but they were there because she was watching the house and she didn't really want them there. But to know these people and go to school with them and just the fear that she had to have, and she's fighting it knowing full well she was by herself and that, her ultimate demise was pretty much her fate at this point. And she knows it. And it's just a very, very sad case. So while everything felt dark for a long time, the loss of his sister did bring some perspective about life. And Andrew is quoted as saying, "It makes you appreciate things a lot more. You never know how fragile life is. You never know how easy it is for someone to be gone the next day."
And that is very true.
Yeah, the sunrise is promised to no one.
And your life can turn on a dime at any second.
Exactly.
Both of us have experienced that. So make sure you tell your loved ones how you feel.
Exactly. So it's a very tragic case, Lauren. This is a very sad one. This was a young girl who was so responsible, so smart, so just giving. I mean, and there was no reason for any of this to happen other than two guys just saw a show on TV and just thought it would be cool to pretend to be that.
And it also, now I hadn't planned on bringing this up, but it just occurred to me, in the last 10 to 20 years, the things that have been happening in our country, the school shootings, we don't really have serial killers that often anymore, like Ted Bundy, Hillside Strangler, John Wayne Gacy. Now it's school shootings and just mass murders and things like that. And it's the copycat portion of this is what scares me the most, because you never know who's impressionable enough to think, hey, I could pull that off. I could do that.
I could be smarter. Yeah, you're right.
And that's the scary thing. And I don't know. I'm not even going to act like I know what the answer to it is. I really do like the Don't Name Them initiative. We're talking about mass shooters where they do not name the mass shooters
and
whenever.
And here at Paradise After Dark, we've decided we're not going to cover those.
That's why we don't cover mass shootings, because we don't want to give the fame and notoriety. And by creating this episode, please do not think that we are trying to give fame and notoriety to Draper and Adamcik, because we're not talking them up. We think they're pieces of shit.
There's no doubt about that.
So, sorry guys, you fucking suck.
You heard it here, folks. So, I guess, Lauren, is there anything else you want to say, or is that kind of...
I just want to tell our listeners there will be no episode next week because we will be at CrimeCon. We're going to take a break, spring break, but we'll be back at you with a CrimeCon recap episode. I'm also doing a live taping of an episode at CrimeCon with Kelly from True Crime IRL, which we will be uploading to our feed. So we've got a lot coming up, but next week we're taking a week off. We're going to CrimeCon. Very excited.
One thing to know about CrimeCon is every single event we've attended, there has been some great, great friendships made. As a matter of fact, Kelly Barron's Break from True Crime IRL.
We met last year at
CrimeCon. And it was just by coincidence, and we just get to meet people, and it's a wonderful thing. So I know it's a last minute thing, but if you're going to be there, that's fantastic. Please come and see us. We'll be on Podcast Row. If not, make sure you get there or tune in and listen to our we're going to probably do an episode after the fact about what we've done at CrimeCon, who we met, the things that occurred. I'm sure there'll be Ken's flight story, because there's always a flight story for Ken.
Yep.
No matter what we do, there's a flight story. Fortunately, we won't be on Spirit Airlines, so we won't be in the back of what I call the airplane Jeep. So, but anyway, everybody, thank you very, very much for listening
to Paradise After Dark.
Dark.